In this video we reviews the best camera for beginners in 2024, top picks for photo and video novices. Our guide to the best camera for beginners. The best camera for beginners isn't necessarily a smartphone. Whether you want a bigger sensor, superior handling, or simply to shoot with a viewfinder, we've reviewed all of the top entry-level options. After countless hours of testing, we've ranked our favorite beginner cameras in the comprehensive list below. We think the best camera for most beginners right now is the Canon EOS R50. One of the main reasons is its class-leading autofocus, which it's inherited from much pricier cameras. But it's also equipped with good burst shooting speeds, a lightweight build and accessible controls, which give you the mirrorless flexibility to improve as a photographer. The Canon EOS R50 isn't the only choice you should consider, though. If lens options are high on your list, it's hard to beat the Fujifilm X-S10. Or if you plan to shoot video, the Sony Alpha A6400 is a pocket filmmaking tool worth your attention. If you're on a tight budget, consider of the best cheap cameras or look at second-hand prices for the predecessors of cameras in our list, such as the original Fujifilm X-S10. Whatever your needs and budget, you'll find some of the best point-and-shoot cameras in our list, alongside mid-range models that give beginners room to grow. We've tested a huge variety of beginner cameras to help you find the right choice for your needs, while our built-in price comparison tool will serve up all of the latest available discounts, too. Number 1. Fujifilm X-S10 Mirrorless Camera Body. The Fujifilm X-S10 is the priciest option on our list, but it's also one of the most well-rounded, with features that'll suit both new and more advanced users. It's been superseded by the Fujifilm X-S20, but that model is notably pricier, and beginners will get just as much out of the X-S10. It's a well-built camera with a fully articulated screen and a comfortable handgrip, and it's one of the few cameras you'll find at this price point with in-body image stabilization, IBIS, which can come in handy when shooting at slower shutter speeds or recording handheld video. Inside, the camera uses the same sensor found on the enthusiast-oriented Fujifilm X-T4, capturing fantastic images right out of the box. Fujifilm's beloved film simulation profiles are also a blast to play around with and allow beginners to change up the look of their photos without having to do any post-processing. That said, buying a more expensive camera body off the bat also leaves less room in your budget to buy different lenses. So, if you're still unsure what kind of photos you enjoy taking, you probably won't be squeezing the full value out of a higher-end camera like this until you've got more experience. But if you want a more advanced entry-level camera that's fit for a wide range of photo and video work, this is it. Number 2. Sony Alpha A6600 mirrorless camera with 18 to 135mm zoom lens. There are no questions about the A6600's image quality. It uses the same 24.2 MP sensor Sony uses in the A6500, A6300, and A6400. The image processing engine matches that of the A6400, so, for all intents and purposes, the two cameras deliver identical quality. I consider it a good thing, at least for images. There are some drawbacks to the older sensor in terms of video, which we'll address in a bit. The A6400 has proven to deliver strong image quality, even when pushing the ISO high, and its raw images capture quite a bit of dynamic range. There's plenty of room to adjust exposure and tone to taste. When shooting in JPG format, you'll get images with excellent clarity and little visible noise through ISO 3200. There's a drop in detail at ISO 6400, but you'll need to look at images on a pixel level to see it. At ISO 12800 smudge detail is evident, and it gives way to blur as you push to ISO 25600. Blur is overwhelming at the extreme settings, ISO 51200 and 102400. By default the camera won't range above ISO 6400, but you can configure its automatic range to go all the way to ISO 102400 if desired. RAW capture is an option as well. I converted our RAW test images using Lightroom with default develop settings applied. At the lower end of the range, there's little difference in detail or noise. But the advantages to RAW capture are clear when pushing to ISO 6400 through about ISO 25600. Grain does start to overwhelm photos at ISO 51200 and 102400. You can see crops from our ISO test scene in the slideshow below. You'll also enjoy more flexibility editing in RAW. The A6600's files are incredibly malleable, giving you the ability to open up shadows, rain and highlights, and adjust color temperature without sacrificing image quality. It may not be the newest sensor around, but its imaging capabilities aren't dated. The A6600 does offer a stabilized image sensor, absent from the A6400. It's a feature that comes into play both for imaging, where it lets you eke out just a bit longer of a handheld exposure to get a blur-free shot, and for video, where it works to remove jumps and jitters from footage. Sony brings its class-leading autofocus tech and Big Z battery to its A6600 APS-C camera, but we wish there were improvements in other areas too. Number 3. Nikon Z6 II Versatile Full-Frame Mirrorless Hybrid Camera. The Nikon Z6 II is great for sports and wildlife photography. It has an excellent shooting speed that makes it well suited to capturing fast-moving people or wildlife, though it doesn't have the largest image buffer. Its autofocus system also does a great job of tracking moving subjects, though the interface isn't the most efficient, and tracking is only available in a couple of area modes. That said, the camera captures excellent image quality with detailed photos, excellent out-of-camera colors, and great noise handling in low light. Its in-body stabilization feature does a good job of reducing camera shake, which is great for those who prefer to shoot without a tripod. The Nikon Z6 II and the Sony Alpha 7 IV are both excellent full-frame cameras, although the Alpha 7 IV has a bit more to offer when it comes to autofocus performance and video features. Unlike the Nikon, the Alpha 7 IV can record 10-bit 4:2:2 video internally, meaning it can capture more color information and give you more leeway when editing and grading your footage. When it comes to photography, both take sharp, high-quality photos with a wide dynamic range and excellent noise handling. The Sony is a great option for landscapes thanks to its 33-megapixel sensor, giving you a bit more room to crop in without losing quality. However, the Nikon is better suited to sports and wildlife photography since it can shoot uncompressed RAW photos at 10 frames per second, whereas the Sony is limited to 6 frames per second. The Nikon Z6 II and the Nikon D780 are both premium full-frame cameras, but they use different technologies, each with advantages and disadvantages. The Z6 II is a mirrorless camera with an electronic viewfinder that lets you preview your exposure settings directly through the viewfinder. It's more portable than the D780, which is a DSLR and has an optical viewfinder that gives you an unfiltered, lag-free view through the lens. The Z6 II has in-body image stabilization, and it can shoot at a faster burst rate. It also has a slot for faster CF Express cards in addition to an SD card slot. The D780 has a hybrid autofocus system that combines the AF system from the Z6 when shooting in live view with a more typical DSLR AF system when shooting through the viewfinder, giving it a bit of added versatility. The Canon EOS R50 is a bit more versatile than the Nikon Z6 II, but they're both excellent cameras. The R6 is a bit better suited to video work, with internal 10-bit recording and a fully articulated screen, though it's more prone to overheating during longer sessions. When it comes to photography, the cameras are fairly evenly matched, with effective autofocus systems, quick burst rates, and excellent image quality. Number 4. Canon EOS R50 Mirrorless Vlogging Camera. The Canon EOS R50 is one of the best cameras for photography beginners on a budget. With a portable body, it's a great camera to take on the go. Its simple controls and intuitive auto-shooting modes also make it ideal for novice shooters. Plus, its autofocus system is very reliable, with various subject detection modes that ensure your subject stays in focus, no matter what kind of subjects you're interested in. It's a solid choice if you're also interested in video and vlogging, with 4K recording at up to 30 frames per second and surprisingly advanced video specs for the price. That said, it doesn't have the longest battery life for video recording. If you want something more portable for travel, the Olympus OMD EM10 Mark IV is another great budget camera. The R50 is a bit cheaper and has a more effective autofocus system, but the Olympus is part of the Micro Four Thirds system, which offers more lens options and makes for a more portable overall kit. The EOS R50 is an ultra-compact mirrorless camera with good photo quality and an impressive autofocus system. Its 4K video quality is decent, though it gets distorted easily if you pan the camera, and you can't take a lot of shots in a row. Aside from that, the R50 isn't a solid camera for its price. The EOS R50 has two close peers, the first being the Nikon Z50, which sells for the same price if you walked into a camera store today. While the Z50 has a higher build quality, the R50 is the better camera in almost all respects. Arguably the Z50's biggest weak point is the less reliable AF in video and its lack of 10-bit capture for HDR or log recording. Unlike Canon, Nikon has allowed Sigma to introduce some handy prime lenses for its Z-mount. Despite being several years older, the Sony A6100 keeps pace with the R50 in many areas. Both have excellent autofocus systems and oversampled 4K video, though with similarly bad rolling shutter. The A6100's battery life is the best in its class, and the selection of E-mount lenses blows the R50, and the Nikon, for that matter, away. Its low-res EVF and LCD do knock it down a notch, however. Number 5. Sony Alpha A6400 Mirrorless Camera. The A6400 uses a 24MP APS-C image sensor, the same size and resolution as the A6300. It can be set as low as ISO 100 and as high as ISO 32000 in its native mode, and offers expanded ISO up to 102,400 for those times when the light is very dim. In the lab, IBIS reports that the A6400 keeps noise under 1.5% through ISO 3200 when capturing JPGs at default settings, and shows about 1.6% at ISO 6400, just outside our threshold of acceptable noise. Some cameras achieve low noise scores via aggressive noise reduction, which washes away detail along with grain, but the A6400's JPG output competes with full-frame models when shot through ISO 6400. A close look at photos from our test scene shows that there's almost no loss of clarity from ISO 100 through ISO 3200. There is a very slight drop in quality at ISO 6400, but you'll have to look very closely to see it. It's at ISO 12800 where images start to suffer, details are noticeably smudged. The smudging gives way to blur at ISO 25600, and at the top ISO 51200 and ISO 102400 settings are blurry to the point they appear slightly defocused. It is at these extreme settings where full-frame models pull away from cameras with APS-C image sensors. Shutterbugs will likely opt for RAW capture. I converted our RAW test images using Adobe Lightroom Classic CC with default develop settings applied. At lower settings there's not much difference in detail between JPGs and RAW images. Lightroom's default output even appears a little bit less sharp, but a slight bump in contrast will satisfy photographers who prefer a punchier look to images. RAW images give you a lot more flexibility when it comes to adjusting exposure, pulling details from the shadows, or curbing too bright highlights than any JPG. They also show more detail and more grain at higher ISOs. The A6400's RAW output doesn't lose any detail at ISO 6400, but does show a bit more grain than the corresponding JPG. The difference between JPG and RAW output at ISO 12800 is night and day. The RAW image is certainly noisy, but the RAW file shows sharper, clearer details, where the JPG smudges them in order to wipe away the grain. The story is similar at ISO 25600, although results are a little rougher. Grain starts to overpower the image at ISO 51200 and 102400, though I'd feel comfortable using ISO 51200 for images that call for a rough look or a gritty black and white conversion. It's the rare camera that serves both consumer and enthusiast audiences. Family historians will appreciate its speed, size, autofocus system, and image quality. Photographic hobbyists will be happy with more advanced features, like the subject tracking system, RAW image support, and 4K video resolution. Regardless of which group you're in, the A6400 is a stunning performer, especially when you